5. The Interview. Leaving all the living things in the forest of peace, we rejoin the humans back in northern Minnesota at the Devlin Forest Products head office. Continuing with the day Ethan met Gwendolyn. Ethan made his way to Leo's office while flipping through the folder forced upon him by the old man. There was a resume with no covering letter, the normal diplomas and degrees, and some work evaluations from Weyerhaeuser. Ethan was surprised to find the file's thickness came from pages of military service records, intelligence tests, and psychological evaluations. He skimmed enough information to proceed and set the folder down on the table outside the office door. Combined with what he knew about Robert Leavitt, he was sticking with his original plan to wing it. I eventually learned that winging it was Ethan's only strategy, even when we rehearsed for meetings. Ethan seemed to forget what he was supposed to say and took over the agenda, but always in our favor. Upon reaching the door, he looked down the hallway as he reached for the door handle. With no one in the corridor, he walked to the coffee room to find it empty with 2 full pots of coffee on the warmers. "Where is everybody? Is it Friday?" he thought. The room was almost never empty, as Devlin Forest Products operated 24 hours a day with caffeine a staple for survival within the organization. He usually wandered down to the coffee room around 3 o'clock to gather intelligence from the usual cast of characters hovering around the pot. Before heading into the interview, Ethan called out to Gail, "Can you bring me 3 bottles of water?" "Well, there are 4 of you," Gail countered as she came around the corner and dismissed her statement without looking at Ethan. "3 bottles of water coming up." Gail was new to Devlin and was having a hard time acclimatizing to the level of testosterone and egotism in the company. In her first week, Gail was reminded many times not to ask questions and simply follow directions. Ethan didn't appreciate how his colleagues treated the women at the company. He worshipped his mother and deeply missed her since she passed. I think Ethan was a little afraid of us old ladies, like his mother, because he did whatever we demanded and never complained. He reminded me of my son, the way he carried my bags and opened doors for me. I liked it. Ethan retorted with a smile that was misplaced on the 6'4" Titan. "I know, it's part of my strategy. If I told you all my secrets right now, how am I expected to impress you at the Christmas party?" "Strategy, yeah, right," Gail jested. 15 minutes ago, you thought this was an entry-level interview. Even I know who's in there." Realizing she talked to Gwendolyn at reception, Ethan gently mined her for anything she unintentionally gathered. "Did you talk to her?" Ethan asked, not wanting to overplay his hand. Gail shook her head and pursed her lips for a moment. "Not really, just the usual reception chit-chat. Except she waited for me to finish with my phone call before walking up to the desk to introduce herself," she quipped. "The rest of you guys just barge in and make your demands." "She seemed nervous," she offered. "As ridiculous as that may sound," Gail said, emphasized with an eye roll. "Why would that be ridiculous?" Ethan inquired. He expected her to be nervous. She was in enemy territory and alone, heading into an interview. "Oh, I don't know," Gail replied, not expecting the question. "Her family, well, you know who her father is. I mean, it's not like she needs the job. What would she have to be worried about?" With a knowing look, he left Gail with her thoughts and opened the office door. Without knocking, Ethan walked into the in-progress interview and interrupted Gwendolyn giving what sounded like a sales pitch. She stopped speaking, looked up, and waited for the late arrival to introduce himself. Before Ethan said anything, Gail softly knocked and put 3 bottles of water on the table. After picking up one of the bottles and taking a seat next to the door, Ethan finally spoke. "Don't mind me. Please continue. It sounded like you were making a presentation, and here I thought I was walking into an interview," Ethan provoked. "Actually, I was in the process of registering Devlin Forest Product as a gold member sponsor of the research forest established by the university," Gwendolyn responded as she got up and walked over to Ethan. "My name is Gwendolyn Leavitt," she said, and extended her hand. "I hope you can tell me why I am here, because these two certainly weren't debriefed. Either that, or you are the one in charge, and they couldn't start until you arrived." Ethan accepted her hand with an overly firmer grip, a departure from his usual gentleness when greeting a woman. "Nice to meet you, Gwendolyn. Why don't you sit back down and we can start?" She met the pressure of his handshake and squeezed a little harder. "Aren't you going to introduce yourself? You know who I am. I would appreciate knowing who you are," the young forester demanded. Impatient, and with arrogance that grated on every male nerve in the room, Gwendolyn continued. "Actually, if you are the one in charge, I would appreciate an explanation for why I'm here before we start. I did not apply for a job, nor was I looking for one. However, I was invited here," she insisted. "I accepted the meeting under the premise that Devlin considered sponsoring the research forest." "Well, Gwen, why do you think you are here?" Ethan baited. Passing control back to her to see what she would do with it, Ethan started throwing questions at her to see what would stick. "Ethan told me he never needed a person's resume for an interview. It was too easy to lie on paper. Instead, he put candidates through a series of tests he fabricated on the spot to determine whether they were someone he could trust. I watched Ethan in many meetings. He could look at a person and determine whether they were lying. Even when the governor reneged on our forest licenses, I'm sure he knew it was coming. A quality that made people hate him just as easy as like him." "It's Gwendolyn, not Gwen," she shot back. Already under her skin. Test 1? Check, Ethan thought. "Did you attend UMD?" "You mentioned the research forest," Ethan asked, expressing little interest. "You didn't read my resume either?" Gwendolyn questioned with irritation. "You arrive late and unprepared. Then you don't introduce yourself and instruct Gail to bring in 3 bottles of water when you know there are 4 of us." She paused and shook her head. "If we are done with the tests, can we talk about why I'm here?" "I'll ask again. Why do you think you are here?" Ethan repeated. It was easy to get her to react, like winding up a spring-loaded toy. Ethan explained he found this tactic effective in most negotiations. It let his opponents expend all their ammunition on his questions, while he kept his powder dry for the meeting following the meeting. After interviewing Gwendolyn, he told me about her and how she impressed him when she scolded him. I saw it in early meetings with her, too. She was quick to react and get defensive, but learned to control her emotions a little during the time we spent together. With a deep breath, Gwendolyn wound up and detailed her assessment of the situation. "Your colleagues, Leo and Ian, who have done their very best to keep me occupied until you arrived, already took us down the interview path, which we all know is laughable, especially following my last experience in this office," Gwendolyn said with her eyes leveled on Ethan. "Your last experience?" Ethan asked and glanced over at Ian, his senior and permanent junior in the company. Ian smiled smugly and tapped the folder on the table in front of him, which looked exactly like the folder the old man handed Ethan earlier. Not wanting anyone to explain her early encounter, Gwendolyn answered, "I was invited to an interview shortly before I graduated, and one of your VPs informed me I would never work for Devlin, nor would I work for any company doing business with the company, and so on and so forth," Gwendolyn detailed as she straightened up in her chair and shifted to its edge. But we are down the interview path now, thanks to your colleague Ian, so let's talk that out." Pausing only for air, Gwendolyn continued with her tirade. "Your company has a reputation for hiring only the best. Everyone enrolled in UMD's forestry program knows you interview the top 10 graduating students every year and hire at least 2. If I am here, you must need somebody beyond the best, and that would be me. I would be invaluable to this company if you hired me." She paused before continuing to take a breath. "Since we all know that isn't happening, would you be interested in discussing the sponsorship? We are looking for corporate sponsors and donations to fund our annual symposium. Leo, you attended last year, remember?" Gwendolyn asked as she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. "You gave a presentation on Devlin's silviculture investments and tree improvement program," she reminded him. "There is a brief prospectus for the research we are doing and a sponsorship form, if you are interested." "Hang on a second, Gwendolyn," Ethan sternly interjected. "Can I get a word in?" he asked. Accepting her lingering blink as an affirmative answer, Ethan explained. "I assume we are talking about Mike?" Ethan asked of Leo, his supervisor on paper, before continuing. "Yes, Ethan," he confirmed. "Mike took it upon himself to bring her in when she graduated, shortly after the licensing negotiations that year. You remember? We couldn't agree on that block off Highway 642 and ended up in binding arbitration," he explained. Mike blamed Robert for tricking the arbitrator. Before he could give up any more details, Ethan interjected. "That was Mike's style. Sharpening our knives on each other is part and parcel of working for Devlin. It was an atmosphere Mike took great pride in building and instigating," Ethan recalled. "Takes thick skin to work here." When he told me about the interview, Ethan expressed sympathy for Gwendolyn. Putting himself in her shoes, it must have been so hard to grow up having Robert Leavitt for a father. Ethan made room for the possibility that surviving her upbringing may have guaranteed her Titan status and a worthy ally. She seemed to handle herself where her colleagues often struggle. "Let's back this up and start over. My name is Ethan Travers, and I am the Vice President of Planning, Mergers, Acquisitions, and everything else that isn't nailed down." Ethan pointedly introduced himself and his ego. Conscious of how far she overstepped in the interview, Gwendolyn accepted the offer to start over. "It's nice to meet you. Where do you want to start? It seems you know much more about me, especially about my family, which I hadn't realized. I'm not sure what more I could tell you." "That file is pretty thick," Gwendolyn observed, releasing a whiff of fear as her anger subsided. "Agreed," Ethan said and stood up. "Let's pick this up down the street. Head down to the fast lane and ask for my table," Ethan instructed. "I will be there as soon as I'm done." "The fast lane?" Gwendolyn asked and wrinkled her brow. "Isn't that a—" "Peeler bar? No, that closed a few years ago. It's a sports bar now," Ethan answered. He failed to mention that it was all the same staff and customers from the previous establishment, which he also visited once or twice. He called it the perfect place to render straight-laced people just uncomfortable enough to let down their guard. Her hair pulled back into a loose bun and dressed in a grey pencil skirt paired with a white blouse, Gwendolyn tried to exude only business. At least that was Ethan's assumption, given what little background he read. "Okay then, will you be joining us?" she asked of Leo and Ian, who had said very little once Ethan walked into the room. Having heard about the interview from both Ethan and Gwendolyn separately, I still chuckle when I remember how they each described Leo and Ian. Ethan compared them to the 2 grumpy old men sitting above the Muppet stage, heckling at everyone down below. Statler and Waldorf, I think. Gwendolyn said they were 2 talking heads without an iota of political acuity between the two. I liked Ethan's description better. "No, they will not," Ethan answered for them. He would speak to Ian again about being a team player. Ian reported to Ethan and should have debriefed him about Robert's daughter being interviewed. While inconsequential to his career, Ethan worried about the effect of Ian's continued deceitfulness on the team. He decided that could wait, and instead wanted to find the old man before heading to the bar. "Thank you, gentlemen," said Gwendolyn. And she walked over to shake each of their hands. "It was a pleasure meeting both of you," she said with sincerity and professionalism that surprised Ethan. "Regardless of my last name, the research forest needs the support of Devlin if it is going to be a success. I left the prospectus on the table along with my card," she started as she pointed to where she was sitting. "Oh, wait, I don't have anyone's card," she realized, looking only at Ethan, who was already making his way to the door. "Ask Gail for my card. She can give you the address of the Fastlane, too," he answered while still walking away. "Oh, I know where it is," Gwendolyn informed them as she bent down to retrieve her bag and jacket. "I used to work there." Stopping in the doorway, Ethan turned and smiled at her. He looked at Leo and Ian, who were also speechless, before guessing, "As a bouncer?" Looking up, she realized Ethan was enjoying the back and forth. She smiled and walked to where Ethan was standing in the doorway. "As a bartender," she said with a straight face. As she walked past him, drawing as little attention as possible, she paused for a moment to whisper, "Your zipper is down." She did things like that to save someone from being embarrassed. She did it for me, too. When Ethan brought her to Mackintosh for the first time, it was August and the blueberries were ready. We were eating them before the meeting, and Ethan found us to introduce Gwendolyn to the other elders. Her smile made me smile, and my teeth were purple with seeds stuck in between. Gwendolyn shook my hand, graciously chatted with me, and as we headed toward the tent for the meeting, she leaned in close and whispered, "Gloria, you have blueberries in your teeth." She handed me a bottle of water and carried on, drawing no attention. I liked her, and I could always tell Ethan liked her too. Ethan continued to watch as she walked down the hallway to reception, where the three men could hear her thank Gail and converse with her a little longer than expected. Her chunky black heels clicking on the marble floor near the exit confirmed her departure. Ethan looked back into the office at Leo and Ian, who both released the air in their lungs as if holding their breath. "Is she gone?" asked another middle-aged man who stuck his head out of his office and into the hallway. Before Ethan could answer, he heard other familiar voices from the coffee room that overlooked the parking lot shout, "Yeah, she's gone." The coffee room gradually filled with the chatterboxes, ass-kissers, and complainers that Ethan usually mined for information. Today, the topic of conversation was Robert Leavitt and his daughter, who very few could even name, let alone recognize. Certain there was little value to the information being exchanged, Ethan turned down the hall in search of the old man. On her way to the coffee room, Gail said in passing, "He isn't in his office." "He left his office, but did he leave the property?" Ethan asked. "I'm not sure. He got in his truck, though," Gail answered as she continued to the coffee room. Retrieving his phone from the breast pocket of his shirt, he read the time aloud. "It's only 3:45. He's here somewhere." On the way back to his office, he noticed a lineup of loaded trucks outside his window, waiting to turn into the wood yard. As he followed the line of trucks, he found the old man's pickup parked squarely in front of the first one. "Well, I think I found him," Ethan muttered under his breath. Headquarters for Devlin Forest Products was located on the same industrial site as the company's first sawmill. Originally opened in 1898, the old man purchased the shuttered mill that was closed decades earlier by the last lumber baron. While the original building was torn down to make way for a modernized facility, the front facade was preserved and integrated into the design of the office complex. Everyone who visited the office walked through the original bricks and mortar that had stood for over 100 years. Ethan told me he often looked up as he walked into the office every morning. It made him feel like he was part of something truly significant, a purpose that overtook his own identity. Outside in the woodyard, Ethan skillfully assessed the situation to determine whether his intervention was required. He could see the mill manager in a heated exchange with the truck driver, causing the congestion. The old man was nowhere to be found. As the exchange escalated to a physical confrontation, Ethan inserted himself between the two. "You, take a step back," Ethan demanded of the driver. "Danny, what's going on? We're backing up traffic. Can we move these trucks off the street and deal with them in the yard?" Ethan suggested. By this time, the rest of the yard staff was walking over to the scene to support their boss. "Get back to work, Stan. El, turn around and get back into your machines. Now, I mean it," Danny shouted. "Normal problems, Ethan. Well, normal for Devlin. We've been having problems with Pier's trucks," Danny explained by pointing at the drivers. "Loads with too much balsam. The tops are too small and the wood is way too dry. It hits the saws and explodes, shuts down the infeed until we can clear it." Well, the old man came out and saw the latest load. The seasoned manager sighed. "He's walking the pile, looking for the rest of the deliveries, and the scales are closed until he's done." Turning Danny away from the crowd, Ethan offered some relief. "Open the scales, get the trucks moving, and we'll deal with the quality issues later," he said only to Danny. "There is a different way to handle this. You go back and explain to Pierre that I will meet with him next week to negotiate the final price. He can appeal to the old man if he's still unhappy." "What about the old man? He just told me to shut them down," Danny said with hope in his voice that Ethan would deal with it. "What about me?" the old man asked as he joined the conversation. "Let Danny handle this for now," Ethan reassured the old man. "We'll deal with Pierre another way. We won't solve this by backing up traffic into Lakeshore Drive and ticking off the neighbors." Ethan observed and signaled Danny to move the old man's truck. As he looked over the rows of logs lined up to be fed into the mill, the old man spoke without looking at Ethan. "Well, that seemed to get everyone's attention." "Yes, Ken, you have everyone's full and complete attention, including mine," Ethan conceded, "especially Pierre's. But we can talk about that later. Can we talk about your plan with this one? What do you want to happen with this girl?" he asked, knowing part of the answer. "Do you know why Gwendolyn Leavitt did not follow in her father's footsteps and attend Harvard?" asked the old man. Frustrated at receiving an unrelated question in response to his, Ethan truthfully answered, "No, but I can tell you it wasn't because she couldn't get in. She is smart and quick on her feet." With a knowing smile, the old man continued, "Correct. She was accepted by Harvard Law, her father's alma mater," the old man stated and sighed. Everyone knew Robert Leavitt went to Harvard. He reminded everyone somehow in virtually every meeting. Robert did not let her accept the offer. In fact, he had the admissions office send her a notice of rejection. She ended up accepting an offer from UMD in forestry, close to home and under his control. Ethan attentively absorbed the conversation, hearing the old man express his hope to hire Robert's daughter to gain leverage over him. He hoped Robert would at least honor their agreement, and, at a minimum, her engagement would keep him from sabotaging the negotiations. Gwendolyn would eventually lead. Robert would stop at nothing to win, and when Ethan was introduced to the negotiations, the scales were tipped too far in Devlin's favor. The old man had underestimated Robert's narcissism. You want her across the table from him? Ethan asked, not looking forward to the answer. He liked the freedom of working alone, or at least picking his own team. Given the caliber of the staff available at Devlin, Ethan planned on externally hiring someone to oversee the negotiations with our tribe. When Ethan told us he wouldn't be leading the discussions, I was nervous. When I saw an opportunity to speak with him alone, I requested Ethan hire a woman that reported directly to him. If Ethan wasn't always going to be available, I wanted to know whoever we were talking to was speaking to him. "If you think she's up to the task, and that is up to you," he said without hesitation. "You met her. Can you control her? I won't ask you if she's capable. I know she is," the old man said confidently. "She wouldn't survive long in the Leavitt household otherwise." "Capable, yes. Confident, able to defend herself, self-aware? She's none of those things," Ethan offered as his initial assessment. "Being raised by Robert, I'm not surprised. He would have only accepted perfection." He smiled at the idea of bringing Gwendolyn to a meeting, continuing with his thoughts. "The old guard won't see her coming, and she'll do a tornado's worth of damage before they find her kryptonite." Ethan was confident he could capitalize on the chaos that would ensue and gambled on his ability to control her. "What is so funny?" asked the old man. With a firm grasp of what the old man had in mind, Ethan answered, "This is going to be fun and wildly entertaining." Satisfied Ethan was fully briefed, the old man offered one last instruction. "Make sure you explain the consequences to Miss Leavitt of joining Devlin Forest Products," the old man cautioned. Not needing to say anything more, the old man concluded with, "Let me know how it goes." As he walked away, he shouted back, "Remember, don't sell the farm, but don't throw around nickels like manhole covers either."